Episode 20, Björn Kafka. Welcome to the Oxidative Potential Podcast, where we discuss all things sports science and performance. I'm your host, Matthew DeRoche, and with me is my fellow co-host, Phil Patterson. Enjoy. Good day, folks. In today's episode, I speak with Björn Kafka from Aerotune and also world-class cycling and endurance coach. This is an episode where, we really dig into some of the physiological metrics and, how does Björn approach trying to shift these or approach managing these metrics throughout the year. And we talk also a lot about, physiological metrics that are captured through power duration modeling. And, what are the benefits? What are kind of the pros and cons of that? Also, what are the implications in using that in terms of whether it's for teams, athletes, whatever? This is a great conversation. This is a guy I wish I just had 6 hours to just keep picking his brain and throwing questions at him because, I'm really, really interested to hear his answers because a lot of them are not exactly what I would expect. But then when I sit down and think about his answer, I realize oh, wow, there's actually a lot of sense to what he's saying. I can't believe I've never thought of those things. That makes complete sense. Why do we do it that way? Why haven't we, approached it from this angle? Also, check out Bjorn's power duration testing on the Aerotune site because it is, I think, the best one out there, and especially he's offering it for very cheap. Some of the other power duration testing systems out there are quite expensive, and Aerotune's offering it for quite a low price. And you can test as many times as you want in that month. So I really think that's a great service they offer. I'll leave that stuff in the show notes, but I hope you guys enjoy this conversation because there's so much gold in here. There's a ton of gold in here. So just listen carefully, and I hope you guys really enjoy the podcast, and we'll catch you later. Computer. So Bjorn, we had a little chat previous to this, and I was super interested to hear your kind of philosophy and concepts around things and what really matters, what kind of is maybe kind of hyper focused on in the industry right now, maybe doesn't hold a lot of value for the athlete. But one thing I did take note of is you're actually really, really interested in how do we shift these things in the proper direction that we're looking for, right? What are these metrics? Because everyone's kind of exploding over the metrics, right? Vo2Max, VlaMax, lactate curves, and all these things. And I've even heard it in discussions that I've had with other people, and it's like, yeah, but hey, we might figure this out, or we might have figured out something, but how do we train it? How do we actually utilize it in the training? What athlete do we train it with this way, and what athlete do we train it with the opposite way? So today we're going to kind of dig into the weeds and why are these metrics useful? What are they useful for? Why might they be kind of taking over the space that we're seeing right now? So do you want to kind of give people a little bit of a background where you came to this from? Like, you've already given a large background, but just kind of for people that haven't heard, you can go listen to Bjorn's podcast on Michael Erickson's That Triathlon Show, and also the Endurance Innovation podcast, where he goes over everything VlaMax. But kind of talk about some of the things that you've gone through in your own cycling kind of trajectory when you started off, because I think those things might be useful to see where people, so people can see where you came from, right? It's not that you just like showed up one day and hey.
No. It's just quite a long history. It starts at the beginning of the 90s, to be honest. But I don't want to make too big thing out of it, because then it's getting boring. Now, of course, as most of us, I started endurance training. I was like a teenager. Yeah, I had a friend who was into mountain biking, and yeah, it was fascinating for me. Yeah? All the technique aspects, and then all the training. And then it was during the time when Jan Ulrich became world champion in the amateur. It was like 1992 or something like that, or 91 in Oslo. Sorry if I mixed that up. Yeah? Anyway, it was the same year when Lance Armstrong won the world championships, and in the elite category. So, and then I became more interested in cycling, and it was also the time when East Germany opened up to West Germany. So we have one country, and so all the old, all the training ideas from East Germany came to West Germany, which is quite interesting. It's still very interesting, and so yeah, I started actually cycling, just first for fun. And then it was getting more and more competitive. And it was during the time when, Jan Ulrich won the Tour de France, Björn Ries, and all these guys, and all these big doping scandals, of course. And so, I was into that. I was an okay cyclist. I was not really, I wouldn't say, if I compare the numbers today with the riders I trained, I would say, oh man, I was lousy. I was really like, please don't talk about my cycling history. Yeah. Anyway, I think it was like shifting 2000, something like that, and I was competing in a race, and some of the guys I trained a lot with was caught with doping. I mean, like with everything. And that was the time I said, okay, I stop it. I was really pissed, and so I didn't want to know anything more about cycling. So I stopped that. I studied Islamic studies and Scandinavian studies, which is like complete opposite of cycling and all these kind of things. But was also more like an interesting. I was interested in Islamic things because 9/11 happened during that time. And first I studied philosophy and history, and then I shifted to Islamic studies and Scandinavian studies. And then I became a journalist, a freelance journalist for different kind of magazines and newspapers. And then I got the offer for being a bike editor at the Bike magazine in Germany, which is, I think it's still it was Europe's biggest mountain bike magazine.
Okay.
And there's also the Tour magazine. It's in the same building, which is the biggest road bike magazine. So they gave me this very nice job, and I thought, okay, I still do a lot of cycling, know a lot. So, and started there, and I was the editor for the training stuff, and also doing stories about that, and I'm becoming more and more interested in that, and so I was also very good at doing like calculations, all these kind of things. So, and during that time, a friend of mine started working with simulations in metabolic simulations, and then we thought, okay, maybe do something together. And so that's actually it. Yeah. So we started a company, which was a lot of fun, became successful, to be honest, but we didn't have any clue about financing and all these kind of things. Yeah. And so it was like a big mess after a while. It was fun. And then I started a new company with some other guy asked me, okay, we want to do a new company. It was like very well structured. I thought, okay, yeah, because the old company, we just close it. My friend go to the federation, cycling federation. And I said, okay, I do it just with the new stuff, which was quite fun, but the heart was missing a little bit. And they were more focused on like, working with like, I would say like recreational athletes, losing some weight and all these kind of things, which is absolutely fine, but not for me. I'm not that guy. So, so I said, okay, I'm leaving this company, and and that's actually it. Yeah. So besides that, so I always was developing these calculations, these simulations, metabolic simulations. Started like almost like 7-8 years ago now. And Sebastian Schlurke from Aerotune said, "Oh, great, you have all these nice calculations, but it's a total mess because it's all in Excel." Like 20 sheets of Excel, everything is in there. It's like crazy. Yeah. So I said, "Okay, you need to learn programming." And I said, "Yeah, well, I'm not sure." He said, "Yeah, you can do that." Okay. And so I learned programming. And then I start programming, and with, to be honest, a huge help of Sebastian Schlurke, we started developing this metabolic testing on Aerotune. And he already had this amazing aerodynamic calculation, which is used by a lot of World Tour teams. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible to access this tool, to make it very affordable, so that everyone can test. So this is, and getting these numbers and know on which part of the system, so I would call it, to work on. We call it just democratizing testing. So you don't have to go to a lab paying 200 euros and getting maybe okay results or maybe not. So that's actually it. So and then of course I'm coaching a lot. So some world champions and Olympics and all these kind of things. And well, helping some World Tour teams with coaching.
It keeps the drive, right? Like it keeps the drive to continuously improve, because when the accountability is on you, you want to continuously push whatever it is that you're bringing forward or bringing to the table to newer heights. When did you start seeing, because you started off with physiological testing, when did you start seeing that this power duration modeling and calculating these kind of metabolic markers on the hard metrics was useful? Because I think everyone kind of comes through that epiphany sooner or later. Like people will read about power duration modeling and some of these things, and they're like, yeah, and it doesn't really click right away for a lot of people. But when did that click kind of happen in your head?
Oh, it took actually quite a long time. I think we are all branded with like there's kind of an FTP model, which is very easy to understand.
Yeah.
It's like super simple. I even can explain that to my mother. No, actually, we always, we are not car engines. You don't put in gasoline and then it's running. So we run on a lot of fuel. And we run on a lot of systems, so to say. So if I'm getting up on my chair, I'm actually using some phosphates. So, and we have to keep in mind that we have like these different kinds of systems that we are using, but how much do we use it? And what does it mean if I have like a huge part of this and a small part of this? And if I want to compete in this kind of range, which kind of ratio should I have to be good at a certain sport? So this is the first thing that really made this concept very interesting for me. So suddenly I can start modeling athletes for different kind of purposes. And this, of course, takes a lot of time, and patience. So I said, I have one rider especially in mind. He's very good, mountain bike world champion. It took us 7 years. And he is of course good. He was good already. And if you want to become a world champion, you already have to be gifted. That's for sure. There's no one getting up with like a 50 Vo2Max. You will not be a world champion. That's it. Sorry. And then I said, okay, maybe we start getting your Vo2Max up. So how do we do that? So, and then you read, and then you do, and then you have to add a lot of energy flux, and it's like everybody is different. So you need a lot of different kind of stimulus, and then you constantly measure, and we measured it with lactate and also with spiroergometry. So, but it becomes very to be honest, unhandy, because the people can't come to the lab constantly. And if they are using a handheld device, lactate, first of all, it costs money. Second of all, they can make huge mistakes. And interpreting lactate values is, especially bad ones, are, a handheld device is sometimes good if the person who uses it knows what it's doing. But so I developed this system out of power, because it's a chicken and egg question. If we got lactate and Vo2Max and all these kind of things, we said, okay, if you have this kind of lactate buildup and this kind of Vo2Max, you have this kind of power output during that, for example, for 60 minutes. So we do it the other way. I have a power output and I say, okay, this means that we, in theory, we have like this kind of lactate buildup, this kind of Vo2Max. But we always have to be honest, it's a model. It works very well for me, but it's still a model. So we just reverse engineer the metabolic things that are happening in our body. So that's actually it. And if I look at the power curve, the classic power curve, and if you have some kind, you have your critical power, and then you have maybe a W prime. So what always interests me, okay, well, how is this W prime kind of mixed up? So how big is the phosphates? And what is about the pH buffering? So how much glycolytic flux in there? It's still like no one can say that, but the VlaMax gives me a little idea. Okay, maybe this part is VlaMax, and the buffering is very tricky. And then we have like the phosphates. Okay, we can guess that. If we have a sprint test, so I try to calculate how much fibers we have that we're using phosphates, especially creatine phosphates, so that you get an idea. Okay, maybe this guy is very gifted in sprinting because he has a very huge phosphates. But maybe he also have a very little VlaMax, because sometimes some people who can sprint are not necessarily don't necessarily have a huge VlaMax. You see that, and that's very strange sometimes. And you see some sprinters, that are very gifted with like short sprints and also can climb well, and they have huge great time trials. I have one rider in mind, and I think everyone knows him. He was former mountain biker and won like 3 world championships on the road. And he's that kind of rider. I think he never had a real high VlaMax. He was gifted. So, and this is actually it. So I know which kind of different parts we have and how should I work on that. And this is the most important thing for me. And then the big question is, how do we stress these kind of systems to get the result we want? And this is always a big black box. And I hope that answers the question somehow.
No, it does, because I mean, I was starting to find the value in hard metric testing for the last little bit here, and what really solidified it. We were having a discussion on a forum, and someone brought forth some of their research where there was a decoupling from power and VlaMax, right? Because they were testing it along with near signal, right? So they were trying to figure out how near is correlated to VlaMax, and in this homogeneous group, as the power went up, the VlaMax went down. And then I started reading some of Moder's, I think it was Ulbricht's work, some of his older work again, and I found he came across some of the same things with rowers. So when he tested the homogeneous group of rowers within the same kind of category, the same thing was brought up there, that the VlaMax decreased as the power profiles were increasing in this group. And then I said, what are we even measuring here? Like I had this kind of epiphany, being like, okay, so we're actually getting what we're looking for better right here in the power than what we're looking for in this metric that we were associating with power. And then it kind of clicked to me, like, everything, that is useful can't always be measured. So when we're trying to measure these metrics as proxies, we have to be careful. So yeah, and then we see that in similar things where we're measuring Vo2Max going up, but there's no performance increase, right? On the other side of the table, right? When we're measuring it on the cart, sometimes we see drastic, and we were just talking about this with BFR the other day, right? Because blood flow restrictions is kind of big, and in some of those studies, we're seeing increases in Vo2Max, but no performance coupling with that. So then it just every couple of weeks, I just start seeing more and more and be like, oh, wow, this is really honing in to maybe be the new thing. So go ahead. I want to hear your.
I always, if you see studies, and they do some, after that studies, they do some performance testing, I'm always like, okay, we're only getting 1 point of that. Maybe we have they do a Vo2Max test before and after that, and then they try to interpret the threshold out of that, which is quite complicated. Maybe they do lactate measuring out of that, then we have better numbers. But it's always like, how were they before? And maybe if you get the VlaMax, we have I can compare it better. But it's always like, we don't know if it's a truth. For me, it's a handy tool, but it's sports science. So we have to be honest. It's not not physics. Where we really making things very small, developing models out of that, and maybe testing it. This will not happen. This will not happen. It's too complicated. So we're always guessing. And but the more data I get, and I have huge amounts of data, and the more data I prove, I see, okay, there's something, and maybe this kind of stimulus with this kind of fiber distribution we have in the muscle, you can guess, maybe calculate. We calculate that out of the testing. This kind of training will have this kind of stimulus, and it seems to work, and for a lot of our riders.
So let's get into to training some of these things, because realistically, whether the athlete knows what the VlaMax is or the Vo2Max is doesn't matter, but how they shift it to align with a more optimal physiology towards their demand of the event that they're engaging in is kind of the real question. I think there's a lot of stuff being put forth of around torque, within cycling, different torques are going to maybe change the VlaMax or play a component of that. Also, fasted rides or depleted rides, depleted rides. How do you, let's just talk about training the VlaMax first. When we got someone on the high end of the coin and someone on the low end of the coin, obviously it's going to take forever to shift these things to the opposite, right? You're right.
Sometimes it's even not possible. You're stuck. If you have someone with a very high VlaMax, you're happy if you're getting down to 0.4 after 4 years or something like that, and that's it.
So let's go on this tangent here.
Yes. So when I start working with some athletes, first of all, I look how old they are. If it's like a young guy, I know, okay, he's very flexible, metabolic flexible. It's a very modern thing to say, I think. And you can form these bodies. That simple it is. And but I always try to get the Vo2Max high, of course, with a certain amount of load, a certain amount of energy flux, which usually should contain a lot of long, easy, boring miles. And of course, we can do another way around, which we see in modern cycling, especially in development teams, that you go hard. You have a huge impact on the Vo2Max. And then you have very young riders that are very successful, and everyone tries to aim to getting the new superstar. But there are only a few of these guys, and they are already gifted. And 90% of the young development riders, I think, will not. You will not see them. in 5 years. It's you can't hold that kind of intensity training for a long time. So I do, first of all, miles, because I want a certain VO2 max. And then they have, I don't know which event, maybe it's a track cyclist. So then okay, the VlaMax should be a little bit higher for the pursuit. Which position does this rider have, first, second, or third, or fourth? So, and then you start developing year after year. And I talked to a very good track coach a few days ago, and he brought it actually to the point. He said, we're always thinking about Olympic cycles, and this is quite nice for an Olympic athlete. So we have 4 years time, and I think we should think about these longer times when we work with athletes. We need time to develop these things, and we need time to get the VO2 max up. So, and then when you're in a season, then I said, okay, we start, and I want to raise your VO2 max, and maybe your VlaMax is also getting up a little bit. So maybe it's not the best preparation for the racing, but in the long term, it's good, because in 2 years you will win. And then of course you always have the short term, which everyone wants to aim for. And then you say, okay, we're hammering down your VlaMax, with like torque work and threshold and not eating, and this works. Of course it works for 8 weeks. Then you maybe have a good race. Then you try it again, and then it's not going to work. And then you try it again, and then you stop eating, because there's this thing with keto, and you're using more fats and all these kind of cool things. And then it's not working again and again and again. So you're getting down this rabbit hole and lowering your VlaMax. And if you do that for a certain amount of time, for years, I think it's irreversible to get it up, for especially for older athletes. And so you're also limiting your VO2 max a lot, because you can't stimulate that so much. You can't put out the numbers, the power. So always first getting the engine big. Your horsepower is the VO2 max, and the VlaMax is more or less the efficiency of your engine, and then you just fine tune that. And I fine tune only for 6, 7, 8 weeks. That's it.
That's so this is something that really kind of brings something up to mind, is generally adaptations that come quick leave quick. I've always seen that. I've never seen an adaptation that comes quick leave quick. And when you were talking about training the VO2 max, for example, I'm working with a couple athletes right now where because there's an event where they're kind of coming from a place, whether it was off injury or coming off of not training for a bit, we're approaching training the VO2 max in this kind of high intensity manner, right? But we know that that's going to go away quick. But if we don't attack it early, the response to training after that generally isn't as good. When you raise the overall fitness level of the athlete, you raise the overall capacity, aerobic capacity, that athlete tends to respond to other training after much better, right? More blood circulating in the body, all these different things with the cardiac system. But that is something that I've noticed, is where people are trying to squeeze those high intensity blocks out of athletes, month after month after month. And I think one thing that is not really thought about a lot is when we're talking about cycling versus running, why do cyclists have generally on average much higher VO2 maxes than runners, right? When you think about it, like, these guys are spending hours and hours of this low intensity threshold on the bike. Runners, it's a lot more pyramidal for the most part. You see a lot more pyramidal training, more tempo work, but this low level consistency of 20 plus hours at this low intensity is, I think, really one of the keys of why they obviously can handle that, is why we're seeing such high VO2 maxes. So that's interesting that you say that, like, these young juniors are kind of getting washed out through this, hardcore, push to become that one guy that's got the genetics to do it.
That's a problem.
So let's talk about so when we're structuring this VO2 max training, what is the time frame before you start? Because you said you like to tweak, 6 to 8 weeks. if we've got an athlete on the other end of the spectrum, let's just say a sprinter, right? Like this guy's got a power phenotype, he's pushing hard watts.
Mhm.
And how long, I know it's dependent on a person, but how long does it take for you to start trying to take the VlaMax into consideration, right? So we're starting off by raising his VO2 max, his ability to just do work and capacity.
Mhm.
How long is it before you start saying, okay, now we have to introduce the VlaMax? Is it 6 months after some fitness is built? Is it a year? Is it a short period of time? I don't think it's a short period of time because we're trying to train the VlaMax, but how do you look at that? When does that come into the consideration?
Always when I'm working with athletes, after, if someone reaches something, for example, I don't know, 75 or 72 VO2 max, and then we have like 5.5 watts. Yeah. Then I say, okay, now we can work really seriously. And for a recreational athlete, maybe it's 5 watts on threshold. Yeah. And then I say, okay, we have maxed out everything. And then we really look at how we can manipulate the VlaMax. Yeah. Of course, it sounds a bit strange because it's already very high level. Yeah. But with women, I'm also working with the Vo2Women's. You have lower numbers, of course, but I'm always aiming first for the higher VO2 max. But when it comes to a race, an important race, the VlaMax actually becomes a bigger focus for me. Yeah. Okay. Especially when I know, okay, I have done everything for the VO2 max, and then I should be happy. Yeah, before the season starts, or maybe the season is running a little bit. Then I say, okay, now we have the VO2 max. Now we work on the VlaMax. And then there's also another thing we also should take into consideration is specificity. Yeah, so if you go up a mountain, yeah, I don't know, 400 watts, and there are attacks. Maybe you should simulate that a little bit, yeah, and imitate this kind of riding. Or if you do an Ironman, yeah, maybe you should ride into this kind of power, and maybe then put a run after that. Or if you do a marathon, yeah, maybe you should try to run intervals in that speed, and then making this interval first, maybe after half an hour, and maybe after like 90 minutes you start with this interval. So to make the work close to the competition you're doing. Yeah. So this is another thing. This is, I don't know how we should call it. Yeah. It has an influence on the VO2 max. It also has an influence on the VlaMax, but it has an influence on the mind. Yeah. It has an influence on the buffering system, of course. But most of the time, what I see is an athlete gains a lot of confidence out of these trainings. Yeah. If they do this kind of training, you don't do it to really short time. Huh? And they trained hard, and then they come to a race, and they do the race, and it's like, oh, actually, the training was a little harder. And then they start winning. Yeah? So this is another thing. So first, working on the system, which means big engine, making the engine efficient, and then you put on, what do we want from that engine? What kind of power do you want? So yesterday, for example, we had the Austrian time trial champs, which sounds a bit Austrian. Yeah? No, actually, they are very good riders. Matthias Brandtler, for example, who was like a 1-hour world record holder. Yeah, and Felix Rohschartner, who was 7th at the Tour de Suisse with Ineos and all these guys. Yeah, and the guy that finished second was Rainer Keplinger. Who's Rainer Keplinger? Oh, he's actually riding for a continental team. He's an ex-rower, and I trained him for like 1.5 years now, I think. And so we did VO2Max, VlaMax. He won some very big races now. And then I said, okay, now we have the course. Now we have we had like 10 days. And I designed a program that fitted the profile from the course, but only like little bits. And he finished second. I mean, like, this is amazing. Yeah. For a guy that didn't earn, or maybe a little money. little money to compare to all the World Tour guys. Yeah. So this is actually my approach, especially if someone is,
That's interesting.
very good, already very good. So I like the what I think it was a quote from Michael Phelps. I think what's his name, Bauman. I think, So talking about capacity and utilization. I think this is a very interesting thought. So I'm just capacity is Vo2Max and maybe a little bit VlaMax. And then you have the specific stuff, and this is actually utilization.
Yeah.
This is how I work. But this takes time. I have some young riders that only do, like, so to say, capacity works. Even if they do racing, I'll just say, no. You should not win. We just train. We train for 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't care about the result. We just train.
Yeah.
And then after 2 years, they start winning. Yeah.
What is, so when you're talking about, do you think, like, because when you said something there about, shaping the course or shaping the training to the course, which I think is super valuable, but it takes a lot of physical maturity for that to make an impact, right? Like if someone is still, if those thresholds are still leaky, they're not very stable, they're different places every time, their ability to pace is still, out of whack, the effectiveness of some of these things kind of decrease quite a bit, right?
Yes.
The effectiveness of these things. So are you looking for that kind of plateau in the Vo2Max before you start getting, athletes really honed in on training the Vo2Max? Like, for example, if you have a new athlete come to you, I'm guessing you're not going to look at the VlaMax at all, and you're probably going to
no. This is the first thing I do. No.
But I mean, like, sorry, I mean, like,
sorry.
You're going to have a profile on the athlete. Like, you're going to know the VlaMax and Vo2Max when you start, but you're not going to really, for the first couple of years, you're not going to really worry about the VlaMax at all.
Depends.
Really?
If it's like 0.2 and he wants to compete in criteriums, or I don't know, a short distance triathlon, sprint distance, I would say, oh no, we have a problem. It's too low.
So we need to get up. You'll start training that VlaMax early on, then much earlier on. Like you'll be like, hey, we got to start attacking this now because this is a process for a couple of years.
Yeah. No. If it's too low, I need to reverse it.
Yeah.
Because I want adaptation on the Vo2Max. If the VlaMax is too low, we don't get the adaptation on the Vo2Max that I want.
Okay. Yeah. That is that makes sense. Yeah.
For example, a perfect example. 50-year-old male comes to the lab doing a VlaMax Vo2Max test. Hardly eating, keto diet, loves it. It's the best, he's in the best shape and looks like super ripped. VlaMax 0.17. That was very low. Vo2Max like 51. Cadence 60. This is or maybe 70.
Wow.
You have to complete reverse his training to get, because he and it's typical for these athletes. They say, okay, I want to do the Ironman. I'm always lacking a little bit of speed. I'm always trying. They're hammering 20 hours a week, and but nothing is working. So you say, okay, first of all, we start eating carbs. Then we maybe do some lifting, hypertrophy lifting, like bodybuilding stuff, with a lot of rest, eating. And then the hardest part for them is say, okay, you do your training with 95 cadence. And then you get a call from them. Björn, my heart rate is super high. Just said, yes, that's good.
Yeah,
but I'm only riding zone 2. Yes, that's good. And then they say, then you do a test again. The Vo2Max is getting up. The VlaMax also, which means the threshold is going down. And they are like, oh no, my FTP is it's decreasing. This is not going to work. Now, of course, it looks not good, but in the long term, when we lower your VlaMax again, then we have a higher VlaMax. And even little gains sometimes have a huge impact. For For example, if you have like, I have one athlete in mind from England. He has like, I don't know, he's like from 71 to 73 Vo2Max, and his VlaMax was 0.65, and we get him down to 0.55. Yeah. And he said, oh, the numbers don't look that impressive, but my results are amazing. I said, yes, because you have like a little bigger engine, and you recover faster in a race because of your lower VlaMax, and that makes a difference, because this is why you catch the group and don't burn out in the group, and this is why you can sprint. All these little changes sometimes have huge impacts. Yeah. And you always look at both numbers. Yeah. But first of all, of course, I always look at the VO2max, and if I see if the VO2max is not where it is, I say, okay, how's the VlaMax? Is it high? I know, okay, good. We can go long. We can do cool intervals. Everything is fine. We can work on the system for half a year. Great. With mixture of training, of course. Yeah. And if it's too low, the VlaMax, I said, oh shit, this is not good. Because then, because it's also like a mental problem for the athletes, because suddenly you have a huge impact on their social life. Eating. Eating is a big problem sometimes. If you say them, take 200 grams of Haribo on your 4-hour ride, they are just like, Björn, I don't pay you so much money for that. Actually, this is not happening. Yeah, but I can guess that someone is saying that. Yeah, but sometimes I get, when I'm riding a professional rider, okay, I'm so tired. Yeah, go to the petrol station, eat 100 grams of Haribo, and you feel amazing. Sure, yes, sure, do that. It's easy. It's the same stuff like in a sports drink. There's also sugar. Only if you do like super high intensity in a race, we should care about what's in your bottle, having the right mixture of maltodextrin, fructose, or whatever. Some electrolytes. That's it.
So let's take kind of the two different athletes, we got an athlete that's on the kind of junior stage going pro, and then we have an athlete that's been around for a while, and obviously there's going to be differences depending on their profile. What I mean? If the athlete suits the profile of the race that they're going to do, they're probably going to be doing less testing because they're going to be needing to tweak less things to some degree. Whereas if you're trying to change someone that's on the other side of the coin to fit the event or fit the demand, there's going to be more testing probably. What would be the for physiological and hard metric testing? How often are you testing the athletes? Like, because have you seen a point where every week is feasible to see, or 2 weeks, or a month? What is your take on and how often you should?
Usually I do in winter, for example. I don't do in winter when we start training. Or it's not like winter, it's actually it's autumn. When we start training after like a 2 weeks rest, I do like 3 weeks of training without testing. I don't test the riders before, because a high trained athlete loses so much VO2max and power, so to say, in this short time of rest. It doesn't make it. Everything will change. Yeah, they gain like, I don't know, 5, 6, 8% in 3 weeks. It's amazing. These bodies are amazing. After that, I do a test. Before I just say, okay, you start training, go a little less, look at your heart rate, and go by your feeling. These high-level athletes, they know they can train by feeling. It's very, very easy. Just look at your heart rate. It should feel okay, easy. We do some VO2max work, easy stuff. 40-20, 30-30s, 15-50s, or whatever. And see how you feel. And then after 3 weeks, we test. And then I know, okay, VO2max is there, VlaMax is there. Looking at the profile, how was the test written? and then maybe we go to a training camp, and then we work 8 weeks, or actually 6 weeks, like base work, with all kind of different things. It's not like only going long. It's as you do some sprints, you do this, you do that, everything. But most of the time, you focus on base work, and then you test again. Then we do something like 2-3 weeks of Vo2Max work, very hard. It's then we maybe have like January, February, very hard, intense Vo2Max work. Rest again, and then after 4 weeks after the last test, and we test again, see what happened. And then we say, okay, maybe we should do some more work on base, zone 2, zone 1. And then the first races are starting, and then you do some specific stuff, maybe, and maybe, okay, we should work a little bit on the VlaMax, doing some torque work, whatever, and maybe letting the energy running a little bit low, deplete, not really depleting. If someone is training 20 hours a week or 25 hours, it's so much stress. Eating all these carbs in is already a challenge. So that's actually it. So it depends on. If I do a hard Vo2Max block, I test quite close to that. If I do base work, I just take 8 weeks. And VlaMax work, I would say like 6-8 weeks. And then this is how I test. And then we have the season, which is always complicated with testing. But I just implement some kind of tests into the training regime when I do some specific work for racing. For example, yesterday I had an athlete, and now we have the German championships this weekend. I said, okay, we do this kind of interval. And he didn't realize that it was a test. I said, okay, you do like a sprint, it was it's like a tag, then you do a 4-minute interval. I just want to check his Vo2Max. And he didn't realize. And then I said, oh, actually, your Vo2Max is really cool. And he said, why? You didn't test? Of course we test. I just checked that. So this is how I get through this season. And then maybe in August or July, depending on if they do Grand Tours or not, we have maybe a little rest, and then we have a huge training block in altitude maybe, and there we do also some tests. And then that's it. Maybe I do like 4 or 5 tests a year.
Okay. So one thing, what do you, because out there a lot of people haven't really like, I was talking with Phil Skiba a few weeks ago about this, is like, a lot of coaches.
Oh, I love that. I heard that.
You did? Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of coaches don't like the whole, oh, we're going to test because it's going to somehow interrupt our training. But like you just said there, I feel like that's kind of a cop-out, because why would a high intensity, pacing, this, whatever, whether it's a 4-minute effort, whether it's a 6-minute effort, how is that somehow going to deteriorate the athlete's ability to gain adaptation? I just, you know what I mean? Is that some friction that you have sometimes with coaches trying to, balance that? Like, hey, we should at least get a little bit of data here. Is that something that you still see as kind of?
I think they are afraid sometimes. They are afraid of testing the athlete, because of poor results. If an athlete doesn't perform or has a poor result, you have to explain why it is, and this is something which is not nice, but it's very, very necessary, because if you don't know what's happening, and you still try to my way or the highway, we just go through that training, it will not going to work. So you can test, or you can do some getting some data, some good numbers out of the data. And this is not so easy. And of course, if they're on the power curve, oh, this number is very good, but if you maybe you should also test the other one to get like some kind of relation out of that. I think coaches are sometimes afraid of testing, because first it interrupts the training a little bit, to be honest. And on the other hand, it's also stress for the athlete. There are a lot of athletes that don't like testing, because they, maybe if the test is not good, I will not race good, which doesn't which doesn't mean that. Yeah. And the other thing is, if the test is not good, as a coach, you have to explain. And if you do that for a company or something like that, and then the test is not good, and then the athlete, or so to say, maybe customer, is saying, "Oh no, I changed the coach. It's not good. I will not work with you anymore." Then of course you lose money. Yeah. But if you want to work in an, I would say, for the long-term test, always communicate about that. How the numbers are not good. I don't know why. We try to figure that out. This is some part of my job. Yeah, I get data sets from other coaches, very good coaches, and say, "Björn, can you look over the numbers, because this athlete is not performed as we expected." Then you go through all the things that can happen. Yeah, lack of nutrition, maybe allergies, problems with altitude, problems with oxygen consumption, maybe some block in the arterial thing or whatever. Yeah? So we have to go through everything and see what's the problem. Yeah? But you don't get that when you're not testing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, you're just kind of touching on nutrition there. We kind of hit on this a few times. What is your experience with, training volume? Because this is something I've noticed, and there's a difference for people out there between depleted rides and ketogenic diets and training, and also fasted rides. There's a big difference between all these different things, and they kind of affect people depending on genetics, depending on training age, all these different things, right? But what is your experience with training volume? Because we're adding a new stressor, right, of restricting the carbohydrate. What is your experience with the volume? Do you have to tweak volume back with some of these athletes when you're trying to train the VlaMax down?
Yeah, but this is stupid.
Yeah.
If you can maintain in high volume, do the volume. Don't put it's. I mean, like, this works for someone who's time restricted. I'm totally fine with that. Yeah. If you have 10 hours a week, or maybe 8 hours, just go on a fasted ride. I did this morning. Yeah. But what happened when you do a fasted ride? After I brought my boys to school, I just did 1.5 hours, just had like water bottle. And I came home. So can I start immediately with work? No, of course not. I'm like, please. You don't do that with high level athletes. It's, even if you have some good adaptations, but in the long term, it's putting too much stress on them. If someone is riding 5, 6, 7 hours in 3 days, you can calculate the kilojoules out of that. It's huge. You can't eat that. They will deplete. Yeah, they are, on the third day they are already run out of energy. Except they're eating 10 grams of carbohydrates per body weight, per kilo body weight. Maybe it's working, but no one is doing that. Yeah, when they are not racing, when they're in a training camp, yes. When they're in a training camp, they don't do that. Yeah, in a race they do that. Yeah, but even there it's hard. So if someone is doing a lot of volume, it's normal that they can't eat that. Look at the bodies. They are like that, super skinny. What does that mean? Of course, they don't have enough energy to gain anything, not muscles, not fat, nothing. So if someone is doing that for fit health reasons and losing some weight, it's fine. But I think it's playing with fire. It's very, very complicated. You need a good coach that is very experienced with these kind of things, and you go by your own feeling. If you feel like, if you're feeling not good, and the big problem is, some people have just, they just said, I have this great new diet and I'm drinking lemon water and some cold pressed juice out of some, I don't know what. And I feel amazing, and I'm getting all my energy out of dates, and potatoes and rice is bad. And so I did this one ride and it was great, but after 3 weeks I really feel weak. But this is normal because my body is now detoxing. I have to go through that and then I feel great. No, you will never feel great when you do high volumes of training. If you do 15, 20 hours of training and have maybe a very healthy nutrition, but it's lacking in energy, you feel awful.
Yeah.
Be careful with that.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. No, I hear you, because it's a trigger that a lot of people want to pull, and they see it out there in the professional cycling world, like a glimpse of it, and they don't
no
really
one's
realize. No, but they don't. No, like there'll be a picture of someone, right?
Yes.
That's eating a lower carb meal or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's low carb," right?
Yeah.
And realistically, when you're training 25 hours a week, 30 hours a week, you're already carbohydrate depleted.
Yes.
There's no possible way that you're not.
Yes.
But it's good to hear your take on this, because like I've kind of found in the research, there may be some benefit for someone that's training 5 to 10 hours a week to,
absolutely.
And obviously that makes sense because they're not very carbohydrate depleted. But the other thing that we did talk about with Skiba was, Bishop, David Bishop, and the research that they did with the 2 trainings a day, where one was depleted and then they kind of they depleted their carbs and they trained again. He thinks, honestly, it's due to the signaling being twice a day of the endurance, right? And he thinks that's where they're seeing the gains in the mitochondria, which is pushing the adaptations further. He really doesn't think it's due to, the carbohydrate depletion. And I would have to agree, probably, from what I've seen with other research.
Yes, we have done the same with in training camps. Yeah, so we did longer rides and intensity rides on one day, and we had better adaptation than only doing one long ride and putting in the intensity. Yeah, because of course we know we cannot max out the intensity, but we can do that when we have 2 training sessions. Yeah, and because we can eat enough and rest a little bit, maybe putting some amino acids in that, and getting the head, especially your mind, ready to work again. Yeah? So so we did that with some cross-country mountain bikers, very successful, doing 2 times a day training. Why not? Everything that stresses your body works. Yeah. If you sit on the couch, it's a stress for your body. It works. You will lose VO2Max.
Yeah.
That simple it is.
Yeah, it is interesting, because it's funny how we kind of ended up here. Like, a lot of things we just take for granted. Oh, once a day. Well, have we ever tested 6 times? I'm obviously going off the rails here, but I'm saying we've never tested 6 times a day. I know people that actually have 5 training sessions a day for their athletes. They do micro workouts throughout the day. And I'm not saying that's going to work for everyone. I'm just saying people do it, though, right? And they're getting results with it. So, where did we come from that this 1 time a day was, the area that is going to yield the greatest adaptation? But I know even with some of the tendon training research, that signal blunts out at 6 minutes, and it takes 6 hours to recuperate. So for runners and things like that, you can gain, potentially much more adaptation in the day than what they're getting. Whereas muscles and these things, they spend much longer time. But anyways, let's talk about, your guys' testing protocol, and because there's different pieces of the test. What are all the things that you're trying to take into account whenever you have these several tests that you go out there and have people do, whether it's out in field testing or on the indoor trainer? What are the metrics that you're trying to gain? Because it's more than just one, right? It's not just FDP.
No. So you can do it. We have a run test and we have a riding test. Yeah, of course we are from cycling. So, but we also developed that for running and also actually for rowing. Yeah, because I love rowing, and the area where I grew up, there are a lot of good rowers, and the guy that I'm training is also now a rower, becomes a cyclist. So it also works for rowing. So what do we get? So first of all, you need a power meter for the cycling. For the running, you don't need that. Yeah, we can take it out of the GPS file, but this is quite complicated because we need some Kalman filtering and to get a real how to say, the real track, because the GPS signal is very crappy. So this makes it very hard. So you can't say, okay, I run 1 kilometer this way and 1 kilometer that way. You really need to track, and you really need to calculate the right length of the track. The GPS signal is not doing that. So, but what get we out of these tests? So we get the Vo2Max, which, as I said, is like your motor engine, the power, the horsepower. Then we get the VlaMax, so more or less a glycolytic power or your efficiency. How much carbohydrates do you use? And then we get the fat max, the maximum pyruvate deficit, which is now very fancy to say that, but it's also the point where you use a lot of lactate as a fuel. And then we have different kind of training zones, and we also have the maximal lactate steady state. We have the critical power, which is not the same for me. And then we have the maximum amount of training you can do in different kind of intensities per week based on your Vo2Max and VlaMax profile. And we also have the, if you are a restricted athlete, if you have like 12 hours, 12 hours a week, just type it in and say, okay, I have 12 hours a week. So how much do I get? How much should I do in different kind of training zones? And then you get also this chart, and you also get, if you have your FTP, for time trialing. We have a lot of time trial courses on the platform, and because it was developed as an aerodynamic platform, which is used, as I said before, with a lot of World Tour teams. So we have a lot of GPS files from different kind of routes, and you can also upload your file there, and then you can say, okay, I have this kind of threshold, I want to ride at this kind of power, and you know your depletion, your carbohydrate depletion, because we also calculate all these kind of things also. And then you can say, okay, I have this CDA value, which you also can test with us, actually for free, I think, with a Garmin device, and then you can type in and say, okay, I will ride 36 minutes and 55 seconds on that course with this kind of speed, which is a nice way. And then you also see the different kind of what kind of influence would a higher or lower VlaMax have, or a higher or a higher Vo2Max on your performance. We also show that. And everyone can look at that. If you look at our website at descriptions or log in, it's for free. Logging in, and then you can see everything, and you get all the insights. For us, it's very important that you get the right zones for training, and that you really have like kind of a guidance. So what is too much, what is too little? This is also for a lot of coaches. A lot of coaches are using that. Maybe you have a rider who can ride 20,000 kilojoules a week, and you go like, he's always going 25, and he's doing that for 3-4 weeks. So we have like 10,000 too much, and you have to say, okay, maybe you should rest a little. And so this is, I like that, because sometimes this kind of simple calculations, taking or giving your gut feeling some kind of background. Sometimes I look over the training. I would say my training is like 50% calculations, a lot of math behind that, and 50% gut feeling. How's the athlete? I'm still dealing with the humans, not a robot. And listening to him, maybe he has a bad day and his cat was run over by a car, whatever. And then to look at the numbers and try to his kind of feelings for how is the athletes, and maybe I say, okay, maybe we should reduce a little bit here. He needs some energy, extra energy to cope with the feelings he's having. So maybe he's getting, it sounds kind of strange, I'm giving him 2,000 kilojoules less training, maybe he recovers faster. That's how I'm doing it. It sounds kind of a robotic way, but it works very well. So I'm always looking for energy flux, and energy flux in different intensities. It's like kilojoule. It's not like kilojoule. It's like kilojoule in base training for 2 hours. is not like kilojoules in base training for 6 hours or kilojoules at Vo2Max work. So you always have to take this in account. Yeah, if you're riding 4 hours Vo2Max work with 40/20s in a week, you of course don't do much kilojoules, but you put a lot of stress on your body. So you have to take that in account. So this is what you get from the test. Yeah, and also like a little description on what you can do with these numbers and how we would compose training. We always say, okay, I think a good way to train is block training. The way that Vladimir Surin I think he died. I never met him, which is a shame because I'm at the Wingate Institute in Tel Aviv. I'm not quite often, but sometimes I'm there giving some lectures. So I like the approach of block training because it's very simple. And you don't have this shotgun effect of training, doing this FTP and then Vo2Max and mixing everything up, and then you don't know in which system you're working. It's a mess. Yeah, especially for a coach. If someone is coming to me and says, "Okay, I did this kind of training, and it's a FTP built training," and you look at it and say, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, what do they want to stress? What is the purpose of that training? We want to raise the VO FTP. Yeah, but how? Vo2Max high or VlaMax low? So this is kind of a recommendation after the test you did. We say, okay, if you do like sweet spot training, do it like that, and do like 8 weeks of this kind of training or 6 weeks of training, and maybe 2 weeks of this. And that's what you get from the test. Yeah.
The thing that I find very interesting with this system is the system inherently continues to get better and better. Inherently, because of the qualities of improving the data count, it will inevitably become more useful than physiological testing to some degree and usefulness, I think, because like I spent some time trying to understand automated driving, right? Like Comma AI was a company that kind of similar to Tesla and some of these other companies where the inherent models for how they try to make a vehicle drive autonomously is different. Some companies import these rules and say every time you come to this you can't do this, whereas other vehicles they're kind of self-learning in the way that they make a mistake and they kind of learn from that mistake. And then it's just kind of added into the system of we taught ourselves. And this is kind of how I see this testing is like over time these thresholds VlaMax they're only going to get more and more precise to the point where physiological testing will essentially, I think, in some ways be kind of obsolete in some ways. And I don't want to say that like, oh, there's no use for it. There'll always be use for physiological testing. There always will. But I'm talking about for, all intents and purposes, training an athlete, physiological testing won't have as big of a role as it has previously had, I don't think, when these things start to, become more widely used. And one thing I do like about your guys' system is it's not Inside is taking kind of a different way to it, where you have to, hop on this some subscription thing, and there's a large investment in that, right? Like it's just you're taking on like, oh, it's either all or nothing. Whereas you guys offer this kind of like, hey, try it out, see how it works for you. You're going to make a mistake. You have a month to kind of figure all this stuff out. And retest as many times as you want. Which I think is very, it's I'm much more of a fan of that system.
But it's we developed the system because for me as a coach, I didn't want to put in all the numbers by hand into the system. So I said maybe we should develop something you just throw in a file and everything is automatically calculated, even if you missed it, or even if you do a test a little bit too long or a little bit too short. Because of the shape of the power curve, we can recalculate a little. We say, okay, maybe it's 345 or 4 something. We calculate the best out of that. So, and then you have it, like it takes 2 seconds and you have all the values. And if something is not right or feels kind of weird, just write an email and I will answer, or Sebastian or whoever. There are not too many people. And we want to make it as affordable as possible, because there are a lot of young riders and a lot of athletes that don't have that kind of money to invest in a, I don't know, 200 euro test.
Yeah.
They just, 25 euros, that's it. And they can test for a month. And they even can test all the aerodynamics. So you get the full package. And we make it to be, of course, want to make it bigger. Yeah. Well, why not developing something like a training program out of that? Yeah. Of course, that's the idea. This is what we are doing, Sebastian and me. Yeah. It will not, it will not. How to say that? I don't want to influence or making a hard time for coaches. The coach is very, very, very important, because he's a human being and you can talk to him. Yeah. If someone has having great numbers and not performing well in a race, the machine will not figure that out. Yeah. The machine can't talk to you. Maybe you had a very, very bad experience in a race, crashed or something like that. Maybe you have good numbers in training, but you can't perform. So maybe you should talk to a coach, and he will figure that out. Yeah. So, but to make it as affordable as possible for an athlete, because it's done. The 7, 8, 9 years of work me and Sebastian put into these calculations are done. So we don't. Of course, we still improve the system constantly, a lot, every day. But the more people are on it, the more we earn, so to say, So, everyone is happy. Yeah.
Let's kind of talk about, I got some of these final questions, but I'm interested to hear, kind of a longer take on some of these things. Because you've come from the other side first, which was physiological testing with carts and lactate. But out there right now, whether it's a research diagnostic tool or a medical diagnostic tool, maybe like, because I know ultrasound is becoming more popular with Inigo Samalan's company, Muscle Sound. Or some of these magnetic resonance spectroscopy, proton, so they're measuring carnosine in the muscle to kind of understand fiber typology. What are some of these things out there that you find very interesting, and very, I know they're not applicable that well right now, right? Because a lot of these things are not invasive, but they're time consuming and out of the way. What are some of these things that you're interested to see develop more, and that side of things?
So most of the times I have all these very nice tools at my place. Even in my very small, nice home office with my bed in the background place. So I have all these sensors, most of the nice sensors here. The ultrasound now. And of course, it's too expensive. But to be honest, we produce a lot of data, but we don't have a clue what we are doing. I think this is what I see is cadence, heart rate, and power. We still only know a glimpse of the things that are happening in our body if you look at the numbers. And this, I wish, or this is what we are working on, to making more sense of the data we already produce. And maybe the ultrasound looking at the glycogen stores and all these kind of things can add up and making sense. Okay, why do we have like this cardiac, or this heart rate is going down? The power output is maybe like a little bit low threshold at sweet spot. Heart rate is going down, not up. So maybe his glycogen is depleted. Yeah, so maybe we can just verify that with the ultrasound. But making more, getting more out of the data. We produce a lot of data, but we don't know anything. Yeah, I would just want to melt it down.
Yeah,
this is happening, and no one is telling you that. If I look at the Garmin running thing, you get a lot of data. What does that mean? Even I'm doing that every day, and I'm just like, I think I went down from Mount Stupid. Okay, I can say that. But I feel like a lot of the times I feel like, okay, I'm in the valley now. It takes a long time for me now. I think I will never reach that to get a little bit of enlightenment. Yeah. So I think we should focus more on the data that we have, and with all the data we get. Strava and all these kind of other things. And the other thing is we produce a lot of shitty data. Heart rate, first thing. The quality of heart rate measurement, I think, it's more or less anecdotally, is getting worse. 15 years ago, everyone had like a Polar. That was great. I don't get paid per Polar, but no one, just saying that. So we got Polar, and the quality was always good. And if there was some kind of influence, you just saw that, okay, maybe there was some kind of electric wiring running through the field, and then this is why this is happening. So that's it. Today, something on your wrist that you can't. No, everything is making it for me. When we're analyzing data, it's like, oh shit, you can throw everything away. The same with power meters. So I collect power data since 2000. With the first Powertest. So it was like beginning of 2000s. With cabling and all these kind of things. Is the measurement getting better? Yeah, some yes, but a lot of them are not good. And this is mixing up a lot. So there are some companies, I think they are building reliable power meters. But I have some companies where I say, okay, of course, it's like always 20 watts more. This one really makes a problem when we have high torque and low cadence at like 60. Then okay, this is not going to work. And this is making funny things when you have an oval chainring on that. And this is these power meters this is very nasty, because it's like sometimes it shows like 20 watts more, and usually it's not doing that. So I wish that we have high quality data. Everyone should wear a wrist heart rate belt, because we get better data out of that. Even though if we have like sometimes we have good measurements. I think I got an Apple Watch for Christmas 2 years ago, and I thought, oh May, it's the best measurement I ever had. I was like, why is Apple doing that good? And I have other companies that are like, oh no, this is not. I have like 120 pulse and pushing 450 watts. Oh no, this is not. That would be great, but it's not. It's not measuring right. So higher quality in measuring. We really have to work on that. Please, industry, if you listen to me, I can help. And making more out of the data we already have. More sensors are nice, but first we need to learn more out of the data we already have, and then integrate all the other sensors. Core body sensor, great thing. Nice people. I have it. It shows it. It really helped me a lot with especially one rider. Which she always had a reaction when she was taking beta alanine, for example. Her body core temperature went up, which even if it was cold, it just blockaded her. So this really helped us. But first of all, the usual data we get, we should work a little bit more in detail with that.
Those were super good points, because nothing more drives me up the wall. We're actually doing a podcast. Phil and I are doing a podcast on HRV after this, because it's becoming more popular. But for people out there is only one heart rate. Well, there's two that I know of. V4VI, like it's Viva or something like that. It's Canada, and Polar H10. Those are the only two heart rate monitors.
Yes.
H9 is good too, but those are the only two heart rate monitors that have the capacity and sampling rate to make any meaningful decisions off of. Anything like if you're going to make decisions off something and it's 6 or 7% off, that's you missed the whole point, right? The whole point is gone. You can't.
Yeah, I love it. You know, the H10, even if your device is not working, you still got the data. Right? Download that. Perfect.
Yeah.
It's like it's not even. Of course, it's expensive in the world of heart rate belts, things. Yeah. But it's, I don't know, it's like 80 euros. But it's a lifetime invest. Yeah. This thing is great.
Yeah. You get a new strap after a few years. Like it's amazing. And I think, there's a lot of people out there just looking, oh, this guy reviewed this heart rate monitor. I've seen this person with a Garmin one on, or whatever it is. And it's like, regardless of who's wearing what, actually understand the technology, understand, what is it that the technology is doing? Because a lot of these heart rate monitors are, the sampling rates are so low, they're just doing these massive calculations to try to estimate where your heart rate is. And they're taking, your heart rate actually very little, and it's a lot of just guessing and calculating. So I can't stress enough, what Bjorn just said here is like, there's nothing worse than someone showing up with optical, wrist heart rate that's, 50, 60 beats off. And it's like, what do you do with this? You can't do anything.
Yeah. And this makes even the athlete, you can really, they get nervous.
Yeah.
Oh, my power is not right.
Yeah.
And my heart rate is too high. So I stopped cycling. Now I stopped putting more power on, which is, of course, a natural thing you would do. Low power, high heart rate. Well, maybe you should take. And then you look at the data and you saw one line like 160, 180 heart rate. And you're like, of course, it's not going to work. Yeah. Except you have like extra systole heart rate problems. Yeah. It's but
and the other
I've talked a lot about these guys preaching to my athletes, please use a real heart rate thing and not a wrist.
The other thing you said there too was super useful, and I think we get overwhelmed with all these. I can't even go on Twitter, to be honest with you. Like that's the one reason I can't go on Twitter. It's not that it's the back and forth. It's the fact that I've got so many things to focus on already. I don't need to add to that pile. I still don't even understand, what's going on with these basic things. And I'm very confident in saying that I don't know, because there's literally so much depth to these things, and people just want to add the next thing more and more and more. And I think it's good to kind of see what's out there. But I think sometimes just digging deeper on what you already have good data collection on, right? What can you do with what you already have? There's always lots you can do generally with what you currently are working with. And that's a very good point, because I think, we're really just scratching the surface with power duration and, these small metrics of power, heart rate, cadence, like you said. I think we're very, very surface level with a lot of that. We do understand a little bit, but let's talk about this is one thing I'm interested to hear you on. What is something that you've had in your evolution as a coach that you've had a preconceived notion or a hypothesis of some type of concept, and you realize it was rather incorrect? And what was the bias that led you to think that? Why did you get caught down that rabbit hole? And how did you realize you were in it? What was the epiphany that you had and realized, oh, wow, I kind of went down a wrong path here?
Actually, I'm constantly doing that.
Yeah.
I'm doing more mistakes than good things. Yeah, but I try to learn out of that with everything. Um, the things I'm writing down now for training is not the things I wrote down 2 years ago. And as everyone, you read a nice study and you think, oh, maybe this is cool. Maybe you should try that. And then I usually try it out by myself and then, oh, maybe this is something. Of course, I'm constantly doing a lot of things. So, for example, I designed one workout for an athlete, which for a cross country athlete, grade 1, 4th at the European Championships, and it worked very well. I thought, oh man, this is cool, like stimulating the Vo2Max and buffering system and everything. So I thought, okay, maybe that's the thing. Maybe I should do that with another rider with the same profile, but he's not into cross-country cycling. He's a marathon mountain biking. I will say, okay, maybe he's a little bit lacking of this like high speed and getting the Vo2Max stimulated. So I did that, which worked very well. But I also trained a lot of his buffering system. So what happened? So he was, of course, very good in the beginning, but then when they hammering down a constant pace up a mountain, his kind of buffering system collapsed, and he was really like slowing down massively. So, and then I realized, okay, we don't have this long downhill sections for recovery, getting the pH a little bit higher again. And then was like, shit, I really should have realized that. That's, for example, one thing that I have in mind now, which a mistake I did, only a few months ago. But I learn out of that. And this is more important. And it was very easy to reverse. No problem. Now he's like flying again, the marathon rider. And this was one thing, and in training, and then of course in life, or as a coach, you constantly doing mistakes, as I said before with companies, so you start a company, you say you have like good intentions, you really want to do the coolest stuff, and you don't think about like business, finance, and all these kind of things. And we actually started in the garage and was running well, and then huge success in some things. And but it was like a leaking boat at the end, and it was there was no structure at all. And then we have the other opposite, as I told you, and with this very well structured company, which was like missing the heart. And as a coach, personally, I learned that the mistake I did was like the relationship between athlete and coach, maybe for me personally, was sometimes a little bit too close. I was like, sometimes more or less a friendship. Especially in the beginning, especially when you work with athletes for a long time. And this is, I realize this is not professional, so to say. Maybe sometimes I'm maybe a little bit too cold to athletes, but I really try to. I'm very happy if someone wins, and but I really try not to get my emotions too deep into that. So I have one thing in mind with an athlete that is really still working on that. So I have this one athlete, it's a female athlete, European champion, second in the world champs, going to the Olympics last year, and would have won the gold with the team. The team won it. She was not there. And 2 weeks before the Olympics, she got cancer. Was like 24 years old. That's it. Over. And this really was like, this was really, first of all, this was a very hard time for me to realize that, how fast everything can change. And to see this young athlete everything was robbed from her. the future was like over in the blink of an eye. So she's healthy again, everything is fine, but she stopped cycling. She's not. She got married. She says, no, I don't want it. She literally, there's nothing left. And this really is. I still try to not getting too emotional with racing and with athletes. So, but I still learn that. Also, when during very important races, I switch off my phone. I don't watch the race. It's too hard for me. It's like, oh shit, we missed that, and then I switch the phone on again. And if I get a lot of messages in, I know this was a good race. And if I get like 1 or 2 or maybe 4 or 5, it's like, oh Björn, sorry, and this was not good. Then I know, okay, shit. But it's not like killing me too much. So this is something I still have to learn. As a coach, you really it can be a very stressful job because you're working on 2 sides. You try to make a human a machine that can produce a lot of power, but you're still dealing with a human being that have like emotions. And if you want to work with emotions, you also have to put in emotions. And sometimes you're putting in a lot of emotions. So it's like sometimes it's like an actor. And being an actor can be a very, very dangerous job because you're running through all these emotions. Sometimes I wish like I can close my computer and say, oh, that's it for the day. No, I'm just laying in bed thinking about, wouldn't it be great then when this rider finished now on place 1 or 2nd, or maybe I'm running through the whole race, like, when then we get the climb and he's putting out this kind of power, and on the downhill he has to be careful there, and maybe we should have we should have put on these tires because it's maybe this is going through my mind. I'm trying to, okay, Björn, relax, all good. The world is still there. This is what I'm always saying. No one died. I always say no one died. Everything is fine. It's only sports. This sometimes helps.
I mean, I've always been that person to get sucked down the rabbit hole and lose awareness of what it is that we're actually doing sometimes, right? I used to always have to remind myself, like, hey, we're talking about having fun. You know what I mean? This is a luxury, especially when you go travel and see different parts of the world, you're like, oh, wow, this is really, puts perspective. But yeah, it is hard as a coach to separate yourself and detach yourself from, the process that you invest so much in and you care so much about. And it's even harder sometimes when athletes don't see that, right? And they can kind of, throw wrenches in because, I think if they were to truly see how much was invested in the process, they probably wouldn't do some of the things that they do sometimes. Not to throw athletes, because coaches have their own things, but yeah, it can be heartbreaking sometimes, the effort and the, investment and sacrifices you make sometimes. And, it's hard because it doesn't always come out the way that,
but I think this is learning. A good coach knows how to lead and knows how to work with emotions, and he has to be emotional. And we always see that in football or soccer. So they change a lot of, I'm not really into that. Even if Bayern München is very close to me. Like 2 kilometers away from me is the stadium. So, but they change the coaches constantly. And sometimes the teams flip. It's like from losing to winning, constantly winning, from constantly losing. Why is that? It's not like their abilities are not better. They still can hammer on the ball, and they still can do their tricks. They have the same nutrition, everything. But in a week they change. Why that? There's a new coach giving some pep talks, maybe doing a little arrangement, giving this one particular player the chance. And he's like, oh yes, now I want to show. And in endurance sport, we sometimes forget about that. But we are still dealing with these. I have this discussion a lot with some coaches. And so we have numbers and we have humans. And I always say, okay, look at football. We have this. It has a huge influence on performance.
Yeah. That was really, I like that. That was a very good answer. So another question, what is the if you only could have one diagnostic tool, I know where your answer is going to be on this, but
really?
I think so.
I even have to think now.
No. If you could, so I'm saying now you can't have your suite. Actually, I don't know your answer on this. You can't have your suite of Aerotune testing, which is like, you know how you do several tests in one day. You can only have one test. And you could complement that with a diagnostic tool, whether it's lactate, whether it's whatever, metabolic curve. If you could only have one test, so critical power or a step test, ramp test, what would that test be? And what would the diagnostic tool be? So you can use it for 5 years. Maybe it's just to understand the test better. Maybe you want to understand more of how the metrics that you're getting back are influenced, right? Or maybe it's just because, oh, I know this test is going to give me the most data that I need. What would that test be, and what would the diagnostic tool be? You don't have to pick a diagnostic tool, but
Well, this is a hard one. I think there is something into all-out 4-minute test, not paced, all out, until total exhaustion. And then I would do a lactate test every minute after the test for 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. With a power meter, of course. That's it. If I only had one test.
That's interesting. I didn't know your answer. I was way off on that one. That's interesting.
What have you thought? For the other hand is, if someone says to me, what kind of training tool would you use? I would always go for heart rate.
Okay. Why would you choose heart rate?
It's a stress. We see stress. You see the stress on your body. Yeah. Very simple. You have your resting heart rate, you have your maximum heart rate, and then you have your internal stress is visualized. It doesn't matter. If it's hot, your heart rate is high, that's stress. Simple as that. If you're not eating, your heart rate is doing some things. Of course, you need the knowledge. So I would go for heart rate.
I really like your answer on that, because we've been talking now. This has been a kind of thing. We're talking about sensitivity of measures. And one thing that people start off thinking heart rate is heart rate. Like if I'm, 115 on this test, that means I'm fitter because I was 125 last time, right? They start off kind of there. And then they realize, there's different things that influence it, whether there's higher parasympathetic tone, higher vagal tone, from whatever the reason in it, or there's some more immediate stress. And then they start to realize, okay. And they're like, I don't like it because there's too many things that influence it. I hate heart rate. It's never going to be a great metric. But and now then people, when they come for full circle, they realize, oh, wow, that sensitivity is actually good. It's just understanding what the sensitivity is influenced by. That's great. I'm with you on that.
When I did tests, when I was an athlete and we did 3 tests a year, my heart rate was always going through the roof. And they were like, you're not well trained. I'm going to say, no, I'm nervous. I was always like super nervous. So and then they saw the lactate version and they, it's okay. So heart rate is great.
No, it is. It is. People, and I hope I'm going to continue to try and push that out, because I hear so many people talk about diagnostic tools, either being too stable or not sensitive enough. You kind of have to understand that that's just the tool, and certain tools are good for certain things. But I really like that answer. Okay, so we'll talk about this last thing, because it will kind of encapsulate your process. But just, you don't have to go too deep in the weeds. But when someone shows up at your door and says, Bjorn, I want to work with you. I want you to make me a champion.
Yes, I say I don't have time for you. No. Usually, I if I have
What's the
time, I have time.
process? What's the process for you? How do you go about it? You know, what is the process of breaking down that black box with the athlete? Kind of, I know you do testing, but how does that work? Does it just, is it a full metabolic panel when someone shows up and then a full, Aerotune suite where you're giving them every test on the, and then you're doing, this and that and tweaking, but how does that look for you?
First I talk with the athlete for an hour usually and see if we like each other. That's the first thing. And then I look at the data. And then I ask, okay, what kind of power meter are you using? And then I start cleaning the data, all the things that are not looking good. And then I started simulating the things I'm seeing out of the data I have. I said, okay, he had here some good numbers at this range and some good numbers in that range. How close are they together? Time related, like, is it like a week? That would be good. If it's like too much, then it's not good. And then I say, okay, so his ability is there. And then we it's I always talk. So this is the one thing. So seeing what kind of athletes do I have in front of me. So metabolic, on the metabolic side. Then I look how much hours of training. Is it already maxed out? If someone is coming with like 25 hours a week, I know, okay, this can be a tough one. And maybe should go a little bit low. If someone is like 35 years old, doing like 35, 40,000 kilometers a year, and I calculated the VlaMax something like 0.3, and also did the Vo2Max, I'm like, this system is maxed out. It's not going better. And it's even worse if this guy was a world champion. You have to be realistic. You will not be a world champion again. Your system is maxed out. But this is hardly happening sometimes. So I'm talking about the numbers, and usually I say, okay, if you're in a race, usually this and that is happening, and they usually, oh yes, Björn, you're right. Yes, it's not magic. It's actually easy if you understand. And then then we start with training. I usually do like 3 easy weeks to see how the system is and how his riding style is. Is he like constant riding? So is he really riding the power, or is he like flipping up and down, going the mountains here, doing here a trail or whatever, if he's a mountain biker? Is he really riding the power I'm riding down in the Vo2Max work, or is he like sprinting into everything? And looking at the cadence and all these kind of things. After that, I start with testing. I do a test, and then I get the real data, and then we talk about the data. And then from that on, this is actually the real starting point. I say, okay, now we have something, and I would like to work on this and that for the midterm, and then for the long term. And then you are in contact. It's always like lose-lose. I love that, because this is life is changing constantly. If someone is not liking me, he should stop, please, or she. If I don't like someone, I stop. But to be honest, this has never happened. Usually the people I'm working with, they really want to work with me. And but I always say, okay, I'm not a magician. Everything takes time. My training is very boring. I explain everything if you ask. I don't do fancy stuff. My training is like a rocket. It's like we have like different kind of stages. We start with the easy stuff, and then I'm always putting something on the cake. Then we work on the nutrition, and then we're doing this, and then we're doing that, and then we're doing maybe blood flow restriction. Which I did with some riders, but they are already world champion. So we need to max out the system. I'm not doing that with someone who's like not that fit. Yeah. So I'm working on the easy stuff. Oh, this is how I work.
Yeah.
Simple.
Funny. Yeah. I'm
try to be honest most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really like that. It's cool to see how much you're taking to. I mean, all coaches should be doing this. Should be looking at their previous training. Should be looking at previous.
Yeah, this is super important.
Yeah.
Super important.
Yeah.
It's like a history book.
Yes. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You look into that, and it's like, interesting. He was that, and his weight was that, and his power numbers are that.
Yeah.
And he's always riding in a low cadence. And suddenly his left-right balance changed. What happened here? Did you had a crash? Or did you had this? Did you had an operation here? Did you change the saddle? Yeah. All these kind of things. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. You're right. It's crazy.
I have a checklist. I'm always looking like, and after half an hour, you have a whole picture of the rider.
Yeah, it's crazy. Some people just, I've seen coaches couldn't care less about previous training. An athlete comes to them, they don't really ask much of all of prior training. They don't look into training logs, and they just completely torque the athlete into their version of what coaching is, right?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I don't know. I really don't know how other coaches work, but I'm not really interested in that. I sometimes I see the old work they put on Training Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
I try to make sense out of that, of course, but I don't judge it. I just said, oh, this is his style. Yeah. It's okay for me. Yeah. This is my style. I do that. I'm successful with that. I'm happy with that. Mm-hmm. So, and the less I care about the world outside, the better I work.
Yes. I agree with you on that. It's just I'm having a hard time trying to mute the noise. Well,
yes.
We've gone almost 2 hours here now. We had some technical difficulties, but we made it through. But this has been great. I actually learned a lot because I came in with certain preconceived notions about certain things about training, the VlaMax, Vo2Max, where you put them in. I just had a concept of, this is where, of course you would approach this, but when you said it and your rationale behind it is like, oh yeah, that really doesn't make any sense why I would do it that way, or why it would be approached that way. So I did take a lot out of this. Where can folks find you at? And everything will be in the show notes.
Of course, Aerotune, the website. If they write an email, usually it's 3 of us, we get it and then we answer it. Mm-hmm. And I'm on Instagram. It's a private account, but don't hesitate. Just like and everyone can write me. And sometimes it takes time to answer, but not like ages. Yeah, and so I don't have a website or anything. I don't like that. I don't have a Twitter account. Yeah, I don't post much. Only if a rider is good, I'm happy for him. I just post that. You will see any holiday pictures of me. Only that my wife put on and just linked me in. That's it. Yeah. So Instagram or Aerotune.
Yeah. And I really encourage people to check out Aerotune because they're offering something really inherently useful. And I think if more coaches took this approach of measuring the metrics in these ways, because a lot of coaches just aren't even measuring at all. They have maybe an FTP test, which gives you one number, and the duration. Yes, obviously. It's, I just think this is, you're going to have more accountability on you, but it should be that way. So thanks a lot, folks, for listening. And thanks a lot, Bjorn, for coming on. And
really happy to be on your show.
Thank you. Hope you enjoy, folks.